Ladies and gentlemen, with all this talk about neo-Nazis in Charlottesville and the rise of radical right-wing people, and we also have a rise of radical left-wing people, too, with the anti-fascia people who are, ironically, fascists themselves. They just don't know it. We're learning more about the history of this country. A lot of folks don't realize that prior to the outbreak of World War II, our involvement in World War II, prior to Pearl Harbor, there was an organization called the American Bund, which was a pro-Nazi organization. They actually had a rally at Madison Square Garden in the 1930s, the late 30s, that drew 20,000 people.
Oh, wow. With
pictures of Hitler and swastikas and Sieg Heil and the whole nine yards. All of this evaporated when the war broke out. But we had our own version of that here in Los Angeles. As early as 1934, there were members of LA's Jewish community that formed an anti-Nazi counterinsurgency, if you will. It was Hollywood's Jewish executives joined forces with a small group of Jewish leaders in LA to establish the nation's first anti-Nazi Jewish resistance organization. It was called the Jewish Community Committee, the LAJCC. And the story of what the LAJCC did to thwart the growth of Nazism in LA is in a new book called Hollywood Spies, The Undercover Surveillance of Nazis in Los Angeles. It's in stores now, and it's a pleasure to welcome the author and historian from the University of California, Dr. Laura Rosenzweig. Dr. Rosenzweig, welcome aboard. How are you?
Hi, nice to talk to you, Doug. You can call me Laura.
Laura, this is a fascinating story. I've always been fascinated by the American Bund, and I was fairly familiar with the Madison Square Garden rally and the activities on Long Island in New York, but I didn't know about the Hollywood connection.
You know, Doug, that the New York story of the Bund is widely understood. But what I'd like to have people understand is that Nazism was actually an international revolutionary movement from the very beginning in 1933, when the Nazi Party rose to power in Germany. The Nazi Party, Berlin immediately started exporting Nazism around the world to transplant that movement. And the United States was not immune from that effort. And so the Bund was mostly German nationals in the United States who had been Nazi Party members in the 1920s but had come here when they couldn't find jobs. So when Hitler came to power, they were planted exactly in the right place to start to be the partner on the other side of the Atlantic to help foment a Nazi movement here. And so what we understand was going on in New York was actually going on across the country, starting in 1933 and going straight through to Pearl Harbor. And Los Angeles was the West Coast headquarters for the German-American Bund.
Now, the German-American Bund was run by a guy named Fritz Kuhn, who ended up going to jail on tax charges and all kinds of problems later on, but after Pearl Harbor. But prior to that, and this takes a little bit of leap of historical thinking, prior to our involvement in World War II, and really you're talking about early 1934 when this started, there were certainly people who had read Mein Kampf. It had been reviewed. People understood the toxic ideology that Hitler was pushing. But the rise of fascism had really grown from Mussolini's Italy, and there were a lot of people who admired it, including in the early days Franklin Roosevelt. Mussolini had brought order to Italy, had made it less chaotic, a more dependable partner. It hadn't taken on the toxic tone that it did later on when Mussolini made his pact with Hitler. But the German fascist movement was ugly from Jump Street. It was always marinated in this tremendously hideous anti-Semitism and basically human ideology. And it makes sense that the subversion in America would find root in Hollywood because they understood the importance of film, they understood the importance of radio, they understood the importance of media influence.
Yes, they did indeed, and so what happens in early 1933 and then into 1934 is that the German American Bund, which at that point had a different name, but we'll just use the Bund. They came to Los Angeles. They created a little cell. They opened up a bookstore on South Alvarado Street called the Aryan Bookshop, and immediately started publicizing political rallies that welcome free rallies. You could go at any time in Los Angeles in the early 30s. You could attend any number of rallies, 3-4 a week, to hear the explanations of what was wrong with the world from the Nazi point of view, and how the Nazi Party in Germany was out to correct that, and how they could bring the Hitler Revolution to the United States. And Los Angeles police detectives were reporting that the downtown streets were just littered with, pro-Nazi flyers, anti-Semitic newspapers, and the like, to as an indication that this movement was starting to take root in their own city, right there in Los Angeles. And you can't talk about this without talking about anti-Semitism, because that was the wedge issue. That was the group that was causing, Jews were the group that was causing the problem in Germany and also in the United States. And in Los Angeles, the most visible and wealthiest Jews were the Jews of Hollywood, of the motion picture industry, and they specifically targeted in Los Angeles the problems that the motion picture industry was creating for Americans, American culture, and the problems that and it's controlled by these foreign Eastern European Jewish immigrants who had come to the United States.
We're talking with Laura Rosenzweig, who is the author of Hollywood Spies, the Undercover Surveillance of Nazis in Los Angeles. Tell us what the LAJCC did.
Sure. So the LAJCC was a group of self-selected, representatives from the Jewish business community. It was funded by the studios in 1934. It was led by an attorney, Leon Lewis, who was new to himself to Los Angeles, not associated with the motion picture industry at all, but who had been a veteran of World War I. And the LAJCC did two things over the course of the 30s. They partnered publicly with coalition groups, secular and non-secular groups that were anti-fascist and pro-democratic, to promote sort of religious tolerance in the city. But then they also conducted a fact-finding operation undercover, in which they paid informants to infiltrate the German-American Bund, and then the dozens and dozens of domestic nativist groups that took root in Los Angeles, who were also Nazi-influenced but would never have called themselves Nazis, because Nazis were foreigners, to understand what was going on, and they were stunned by the plots and the intentions to, cause a revolution in this country. Their informants discovered plots to actually kidnap, lynch, and or murder leaders in the city, and one stunning incident where they were planning to trap Jews in synagogues in Los Angeles and then pump poison gas through the vents to kill them.
It's an amazing piece of LA history. It really is. Hey, listen, Laura, good luck with the book. The book, again, folks, is called Hollywood Spies, the Undercover Surveillance of Nazis in Los Angeles. It's a great read and a great piece of LA and U.S. history. Thanks for being with us.